heard about the upcoming buyer's agent compensation changes and the lawsuit in Missouri that is changing a lot of different things? Well, stay tuned. We're going to discuss what you need to know today. Hi, I'm Theresa Wellman with Homeowner Experience Real Estate, and today we're talking about buyer's agent compensation and what you as a home buyer or even seller really need to know about the Missouri class action lawsuit that happened. So the bottom line is the National Association of Realtors stepped in to make a settlement to stop any copycat lawsuits that were coming up and to move forward. As part of that settlement, they did agree to some changes that will be coming into effect in July 2024. So these are the things as a buyer or seller that you need to know. So the first change is that buyer's agent compensation is not required to be offered by sellers. The second change is the buyer's agent compensation, if offered or any sort of seller concessions are offered, they cannot at all be advertised on the MLS. So I'll show you what the old way was and what the new way was. And the third change is that buyers must have a written agreement with their buyer's agent. It's going to be legally required in July 2024. This is going to require the conversation of how the buyer's agent is going to be compensated, as well as what the responsibilities are for buyers and the buyer's agent moving forward. Okay, so all of these are great. They're going to protect buyers and sellers. The downside is going to be if sellers are not offering concessions, what does a buyer do? So understanding your options as a buyer are going to be really important. So ultimately, if we look at the screen here, in buying or selling a house, there are 3 different agreements that are required. The first is going to be in California called the RLA, or the Residential Listing Agreement. This is the agreement that a seller signs to hire a listing agent. Now, nothing's really changing there, other than probably the paperwork will change, stating that it's okay for them not to offer anything to the buyer's agent. Right now, it's fully negotiable. How much they offer or pay for the listing agent and the buyer's agent is completely negotiable, but it's now not required at all for something to be offered. So that could be a big change coming forward. The second agreement required in selling or buying a house is now going to be the buyer to buyer agent agreement, which is called the Buyer Representation Broker Compensation Form. Now, this form I've been using for a while, a year or more, but you may not have seen it before, or there are a lot of agents who haven't used it before, but it's going to be legally required in July. So you should get familiar with it. I do have a video going through step by step what this agreement is, at least in California. So you should check that out. I'll link it above and put it at the end of the video as well. And then the third agreement required is the RPA, or the Residential Purchase Agreement, which is the contract between the buyer and seller to transfer the ownership of a property. Okay, so 3 important agreements that you need to be comfortable with as a buyer. 2 of them are going to be required. Hey guys, my name is Theresa. I am so sorry for interrupting this video. If you've been enjoying this content, please like and subscribe, as it really helps out my channel. And if you're looking to move to San Jose or have any questions about moving or the area in general, I would love to connect. I really enjoy talking with our YouTube viewers, and I'm so happy to help. Check out my contact information in the description below. Now let's get back to the video. Okay, so let's talk about the old way that buyer's agents were compensated, or the buyer broker. Technically, the broker gets paid and then the broker pays the agent through that process. So that's the distinction there. So the old way was a seller would pay a fee to the listing agent. Then the listing agent would probably pay about half of that fee out to the buyer's agent and offer it on the MLS. You can even see it now today still publicly on Redfin or Zillow what the buyer broker compensation offering is. In the San Jose area, the standard is about 2.5%, but you will see some variance because it is negotiable, and it always has been negotiable. Then what would happen is the buyer would work and get service from the buyer's agent, but there was no legal agreement necessarily. Once the buyer's agent got the buyer into contract in the RPA, the residential purchase contract, then they were collecting that fee on the MLS offered for their services as the buyer's agent. Now, some of the discussion or some of the reasons for the lawsuit was it was just a blanket amount set. The listing agent was maybe price fixing that amount, and it wasn't negotiable, all these different things. So nothing was agreed upon as wrong, but the National Association of Realtors just settled it to end any of this discussion and to move forward and to make some changes to really add another layer of protection in there for buyers and sellers. Okay, so now the new way is that the seller is still going to pay a fee to the listing agent. The listing agent is going to provide service for that fee. Now, the buyer's agent will have an agreement with the buyer, and the buyer will agree to pay a fee for the services. Now, there's going to probably be different levels of service. Do you want to become a client where the buyer's agent is advising you and walking you through the entire process and helping you avoid pitfalls and helping you negotiate, etc.? Or do you want to just be a customer where an agent is just writing a contract for you and submitting it? And that's it, right? So there's going to be, I'm sure, a different level of service. So you need to find what level of service is going to be right for you by talking to different buyer's agents. But the main difference is the buyer is going to agree to pay a fee for the services they agreed upon to their agent. And it's completely separate from what the seller is paying this listing agent. And there's no connection between the listing agent and the buyer's agent anymore. It's just with their own separate clients. Now, a seller still can offer concessions for the buyer to help it make more affordable. For example, the challenge of a buyer having to pay their buyer's agent on top of a purchase price is not all buyers, especially in the San Jose area, have that much extra money to qualify for the mortgage, plus their reserves and their down payment, and then pay the buyer's agent on top of it, right? So it's going to eliminate the amount of buyers who can afford a property if the seller is not offering concessions. So as a buyer, you need to know what your options are. And when you sit down and talk to a buyer's agent, they should walk you through all those different options of what those scenarios will look like. And I'd be happy to do that in a buyer consultation with you, of course. So you can check out the links below to our buyer guide, which has a link to a buyer consultation to get more of that information. But ultimately, that's the biggest change, is there's going to be different options and different offerings to help the buyer potentially compensate their buyer's agent. And there might be some blend that needs to happen, or maybe it's going to be the old, particular seller is going to offer the full buyer compensation and buyer's agent compensation, and you're not going to have to worry about it. So those are the biggest differences moving forward. So I hope I addressed a lot of different questions and what you need to be aware of. Obviously, there's still a lot more to learn about what your options might be. If the seller is not offering a concession that's going to cover your buyer's agent fee, you need to know what those options are going to be. So feel free to reach out. Let's have a discussion about it. I want you as buyers to be fully knowledgeable on all the agreements and what's required going forward so you can go ahead and find your dream home. I'm Theresa Wellman with Homeowner Experience Real Estate. Please check out our next video on the buyer representation agreement and what you should know about it.